I'm told roughly 4 out of 5 people wrestle with glossophobia, the fear of public speaking. 4 out of 5. I mean, I'm trying to develop my skills at something most people fear, and some people fear more than death. The vast majority of the population fears public speaking, and while I used to be one of them, I now really wonder why. After all, doesn't everyone have a story to tell? Don't we all really want to be understood? How will we be understood if we don't share our stories with the people around us? I mean, think about it. We just went through a presidential election. And I'm sure a lot of you were at least somewhat excited about your candidate if you're in the States. But what made you want to vote for him? I mean, none of you have ever met your candidate, right? You didn't have the opportunity to sit down with him and talk issues. You didn't call him on the phone to wish him a Merry Christmas. You don't really know him at all. So why did you vote for him? In a sense, you didn't. You voted for his story. You voted for the candidate based on the story he told about himself and his character, and you voted for the story that showed you the best future for our country, the story that resonated most with you, right? The one who told the best story, the one whose story resonated with the most people won and became what we call the leader of the free world. Now, if this is the case, one could argue that the presidential election is nothing more than the world, or at least the nation's, largest public speaking contest. And the best story rules the world. That's the power of story. Okay, that might be a little bit of a stretch. And I'm sure most of you have no desire to rule the world, but a good story can also change the world. Some in big ways, some in small ways. But a story can change the way you think and the way you approach life. And when you tell your story, it can change the way others think and maybe even the decisions they make. I'm of the opinion that everyone has a story to tell, and I also believe that our stories and telling them can be very beneficial, not just to us, but to society. I believe there's a life-changing, maybe even a world-changing story in each of us, and it's our job to find it and tell it. I'm sure a lot of people would want to argue with that. They'd look at their lives and say it's not been all that interesting. But consider this. Think about the worst thing that ever happened to you. The hardest thing you've ever faced, maybe the worst thing anyone ever did to you. You're still here today, so chances are that you got through it. Or at least you're in the process of overcoming. How did you get through it? What was the conflict? What helped you? Who helped you? What positive thing did you learn in the trial? How did it change you, change your thinking? That might be your story. And in telling that story, you could very well help someone else. I mean, overcoming conflict and adversity is at the heart of every good story, right? From the true story of Jesus to the fantasy story of Frodo, every great story involves someone who takes a stand against the odds, against adversity, and sets out to make a difference, to help and rescue others, often at great personal sacrifice, and in the end, overcomes. Now consider this. If you had something bad happen, and you survived, and you took that story and used it to help someone else, then what happened to you resulted in good. A good thing came out of a bad situation, and when that happens, your struggles start to make sense. They find a point beyond the pain. What was meant to harm you ended up making you stronger and better. What if you started to think like that? What if you started to look for the good that could come out of every bad situation? How would that change the way you face trials and conflicts? What would that attitude change? What if you stopped feeling like the victim of circumstance and started to look for the way to be the hero of your story? How would that change your attitude? How would that change your life? How could telling that story help someone else? Could you end up being the hero in someone else's story, helping them to overcome? That's the power of story. Tell your story, share your story, be an overcomer. And work to live a better story. It'll change your life. It might even change the world.